Introducing QueryCraft AI. QueryCraft is a web application that converts natural language into SQL queries in real time. The first question that comes to the mind is, why do we need a natural language to SQL query converter? See, even though SQL is simple, but manually writing SQL queries becomes really difficult when dealing with a large amount of data. Especially for non-technical people, they become totally dependent on the technical staff to query their own database. And manually writing SQL queries invites errors, delays, and it bottlenecks the overall productivity. Our solution is to connect the people to their database in the most natural and friendly manner possible, very similar to texting your friend through a chat application. We built a user-friendly chat-based interface where your sent message is smartly converted to a SQL query that is first executed, and the SQL query with the database output is then returned. We added more to this system. We ensured that each of your session is encrypted. Also, your database schema is handled intelligently. We are using a very scalable tech stack. QueryCraft is built with Next.js, a powerful full-stack framework with React in front-end and connected API routes in back-end. The system is powered by Google's Gemini AI for SQL generation, and we use Pinecone Vector Database with Microsoft's large E5 embeddings to handle schema. We can easily switch to open-source alternatives in future. We have a very simple workflow. The workflow starts with the user entering their database credentials, which are securely stored in sessions. Next, the database's schema, including all the tables and relations, is properly extracted, and for large schemas, we further generate vectors and store them to a vector database. Then for each user query, a perfectly engineered prompt is built with relevant schema from the vector database and some few shot examples. The LLM then generates a SQL query that is then executed onto the database, and the result, along with the generated SQL query, is returned to the UI. Let us now see QueryCraft in action. First of all, let's generate a demo database with dummy data using Gemini AI. Head over to Gemini, turn on the canvas. Now write a prompt to generate a dummy database. Next, for this example, I choose any industry here. Let us say tech AI industry, and we click generate. Now Gemini has started the generation process, and we wait for the SQL file to generate. Further, we will also generate some natural language queries for this new database, along with their SQL equivalents. Here I put another prompt to the Gemini, and wait for the response. Now, after getting natural language queries, we run the SQL file and set up our database. I visit my SQL workbench and connect to a cloud database. Now I have to paste the generated SQL file and run it. Now we have our demo database ready for testing. Let us copy the name so that we can connect it via QueryCraft. Now I am headed over to QueryCraft setup page that has an easy 4-step guide to run QueryCraft Lake. I have already followed the steps. I am ready to launch QueryCraft. This is the connection page of QueryCraft, where you can choose among database types. For now, let's stick to my SQL. Here I fill in the connection details, most of which my browser remembers, and enter the database name we copied. Further, for secured connections, check Use SSL and add your CA and .env. Clicking Get Started fires the schema endpoint where our database schema is extracted, and also vectors are generated and saved to Pinecone database. This, you see, is the chat-based user interface with options to change LLM models and disconnect. First, let's check the connection by asking QueryCraft about the database. Ask, what is the database about? Wait for the response. Here it tells us about the existing tables, so we are connected successfully. Next, we can try more queries. To start with, let's take the first query from the generated list of natural language queries by Gemini. So here I paste the query and hit enter. Again, let's wait for the AI to process the query. See here we get our response with a text explaining the query, a SQL query in code block that we can copy and manually run on our database. The database output rendered in a tabular format after running the SQL query on the database. Now we can try another natural language query from the list and check the output. I am picking a query that requires multiple joins. So here I have copied another query, paste it over to the QueryCraft and hit enter. Now again, we get a result that clearly shows a text, SQL query, and the database result. Now I would like to demonstrate think mode, which is a glimpse of post-query analysis. Again, let's pick a query and run it with think mode. So I have picked another query. First, I am running it normally. We can wait for the output. Here we see the output again with the text, query, and the table. Next, I will run the same query, but this time with the think mode on. The think mode sends the SQL query result to LLM so that it can provide useful insights about the data. See here, we have a small natural language post-query response. This can be upgraded to generate graphs or also perform calculations on the data. It's really impressive, right? So now let me explain why you need QueryCraft. Using QueryCraft will improve your overall productivity as you will invest less time thinking over complex SQL queries. And with QueryCraft, it becomes really easy to handle large databases. Also, now there is no chance of manual error, so you can work reliably. In the future, we can add the session history to the platform. This will allow users a more natural conversation with follow-up questions and context awareness. Also, we can shift to an open source LLM that will improve security and allow local SQL generation. Further, we can expand the magic of QueryCraft to NoSQL databases like MongoDB and others. Lastly, we can add features of data visualization directly to the system to make it more useful for users.